Hey,
Everybody, welcome to our edition of Beyond Words that we're calling Gimme the $5 Words. And just a bit of housekeeping. Go ahead and go back. LJ and Amy are our guests tonight, and they have their own introductions that I'll let them do that are introduce each other. But we do have LJ Seif and Amy B. Ryder, who have known each other for a decade and have a special story to share about their relationship and their connection and love of words. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with the really good stuff. If you are attending live, please know that you will receive an email from Zoom exactly 24 hours at the end of this training, this webinar. So in that email, you will have a link to the certificate of attendance that we've promised you, as well as a link to the recording. And if you are watching this after the fact, you found us on our YouTube channel where we have this posted. Let's go to the next slide, Amy. A note about this webinar. We hope and expect that you will participate with us. We have two ways for you to do that. In the chat, if you have something that you need to get a quick attention for, but what we'll really like you to do is use the Q&A toolbar. As LJ and Amy are presenting, they've asked that we save our questions for the end of their presentation. And so if you think of something you want to ask, just put it in the Q&A, and when they have finished their presentation, we'll circle back around to all of those. And let's go to the next one, Amy. This is a time-lapse video of LJ, and he was so kind to make this for me because I'm not an AAC user, or the acronym that I learned yesterday, PWAAC, person who uses an AAC device. And I just thought it was helpful for you all to see what went into the presentation that you are about to hear LJ present. I'm not sure of exactly the number of hours that he put into this, but he used his accent communication device with Unity connected to his computer. And just like anybody else preparing for a presentation, he put his thoughts in order and wrote them out and embedded them into buttons on his communication device. So what you will hear tonight is a script that he wrote in linear order of the thoughts that he wants you to hear. And after his presentation, there will be time for question and answer, and he will use his words to answer your questions on the fly. So just wanted to give you that background, because sometimes I think we go to these things and we just really have no idea the amount of work that went into it. LJ, do you have an estimate of the number of hours that you put into your presentation?
About 4.
Okay, so it's a lot of work. All right, everybody, I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself. And we have a couple of questions that we're going to launch here in a poll. If I can find it. Okay, let's see.
I want to get to know you. We have a poll asking about where you're from, what you do, and if you're a person who uses AAC.
Thank you, LJ. And I think I successfully launched the poll, so we'll just take a few moments.
You did. It looks good.
Great. And I do see the percentage of people who have participated, LJ. So we are, I don't know if you guys can see that on your end. I'm going to keep a look here. We're at almost 50%. So I'm going to let it keep going a few more minutes or seconds. See if we can get close to 80 or 90%. If you're looking at the poll, we do have 3 questions, so you might have to scroll on your screen to get down to all 3 of them. Oh, that's okay, Adrian. All
Mhm.
right, I think we're near. It's kind of slowing down. Going to end the poll and share the results. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a nice. Yeah, for those of you that checked other, I know we had one person from Germany and Australia. If you did not already know where we're from earlier. So we have a lot of speech paths, surprise, surprise. Oh, some AAC users, AAC specialist, therapist, other.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to mute myself and be in the chat.
All right. LJ, is there anything you want to add before we jump to the next slide? No? Okay. All right. So we'll introduce ourselves quickly. I am Amy B. Ryder, a speech language pathologist, and have been for 21 years. So my role here tonight is really just as a cheerleader for you, LJ, during your presentation, but also as someone who's been lucky enough to be a part of your journey for the last 10 years, and also just to offer a little bit of SLP perspective for aspects of what LJ is going to talk about tonight, because this is a topic, among other topics, that we've discussed extensively over the years, right, LJ, in terms of AAC design and intervention and advocacy and things like that. So that is my role. But LJ and I met in 2015 when he was starting first grade. So in August 2015, 10 years ago, we've been working together ever since then. And we chose a couple pictures here to kind of look at our history. So the one on the left is in 2021 at LJ's Bar Mitzvah, and then on the right at Planet Word Museum in DC. And so we were kind of joking that it's funny that we went to the Planet Word Museum in DC, and now here you are a couple years later doing a webinar specifically about words and about $5 words. So that's me.
Thanks for everyone introducing themselves. Now a little about me. My name is Louis Syaf, but all my friends call me LJ. I'm a PRC Saltillo ambassador. I'm starting the 10th grade next week, and I'm just soaking up the last few days of summer. I participate in grade level coursework, and I'm working towards a standard or advanced diploma. I love playing Monopoly, and I slay it to know too. I love learning new things and sharing my experiences with anybody who is interested. I drive a motorized wheelchair with my Accent 1000 mounted to it. I have used the Unity language system since I was 5 years old. I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and cerebral cortical visual impairment. I rely on the touch guide to help me access my communication device faster and more correctly. I really wanted to talk about giving people who use AAC or PWUSC as they're known more access to what I call $5 words. People who make the language software systems are not thinking about a robust language. Certain words, like detail and journey, weren't available in my language system, and that led to frustrating situations. Even though I had words, I still could not speak my mind the way I wanted. AAC users have their thoughts in their mind. If the device doesn't have the words they want to use programmed, it is frustrating. When this happens, it requires the AAC user to put in lots more effort. So that's why I wanted to talk about this.
All right, so a little bit of little anecdotes about the beginning, right? So you mentioned you started using Unity when you were 5, and so I met you not long after that. And so when we met, LJ, you were still pretty new to Unity. And so our time was spent on working on overall language skills, but also learning how the language was organized within the system itself, in this case, Unity. And since the beginning, you have been interested in words, right? You used to ask, and still do, but what they mean and want to know more words, and often wanted them programmed into your device so you could use them. And so I distinctly remember one example early on in that first year, which is what this picture represents. And we were talking about how to mark for plurals, or within your device, if you're going to, add an S when there's more than one, for example, how do we do that within Unity? And I remember explaining to you, if it's more than one or if it's plural, this is how we're going to do it. And you tapped your device to let me know you wanted me to program the word plural. And so from the very beginning, you've had this love of words, and you remind me of the character from the book, The Word Collector. So if anybody is familiar, you'll know that the character in this book loves words and loves how they sound, and wants to loves multi-syllabic words and wants to know how to spell them. And it's just this great book about that. And so you take joy in words just like this character in here as well.
When me and Ms. Amy first began working together, we were mostly about finding things on the device. When I was really young and just starting on my journey, I was learning all the words and symbols placement and trying to remember where to find them. At that stage, I loved getting into the classroom fire engine tent and pretending I was racing to put out a fire somewhere. A lot of my favorite words, as you can imagine, were connected to that playtime, fun activity. Over time, my interests have changed, so the same is true for words that I want access to. AAC users deserve to express themselves in whatever way they want. For your knowledge, I had to spell the word deserve in order to put it into my speech. That is 7 letters, which means 8 hits of buttons to be able to use that common word. We want to minimize the things that lead to frustration and stress. Instead, we should focus on the things that lead to the best outcomes. Personally, as I got older, I love to bake and cook, so we used AAC in a lot of baking and cooking activities. Try to create an environment where your child, client, or student just tells you what they're interested in. I also love to play games like Headbands, Story Cubes, Blurt, and Guess Who. My point is to make it fun. Also, keep in mind that most times it is a lot of work to use AAC, so I code switch. Code switching is when I alternate between languages, gestures, or adapted sign language within different situations to get my point across. I code switch when I'm frustrated, and it is usually when my communication partner does not understand what I'm trying to say. So I make a choice. I code switch with my AAC, gestures, or adapted sign language. Sometimes I use approximation, meaning I use a sounder word in place of the one I wanted so that my communication partner could guess the word I wanted to use, which wasn't programmed into my device already. So, yeah, all of these things motivated me to learn more and more words. When you hear me say $5 words, what do you think I'm talking about? You can write your ideas in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes.
All right, so I'll read a couple answers from the chat, okay? Let's see. Power words, more complex vocabulary than you might learn in school. Common words, words that are hard to access. Value, most frequently that can help you create a connection with other people. Jenny has an example, homunculus. That's a good $5 word, right? The big words, words that you learn and use in
Awesome.
middle school and high school, words that give you a lot of bang for your buck, things that communicate concepts, richness, specificity, words that have the most meaning to you, highly valuable or really important and specific. Let's see, multisyllabic words, words that have high value to the speaker, high impact, expressive, and personal. Awesome. Those are really good. Words that show personality. Big, fancy, or
Here's
complex.
the answer. Here is what I think $5 words are. They are words that add flavor, and they get really specific. Plus, they're fun and they add zip. They are super important for school too. For example, with class and homework or state assessments, so that I can show in-depth knowledge about the subject matter. $5 words add more insight and can give you the landscape, so the picture painted or the story told feels more richer, bolder, and layered with meaning. As for these $5 words enabling me to talk quickly, take for instance the fact that I'm a foodie. Instead of me having to say food with no animal products, I could say vegan. Ta-da! Sidebar. I have a lot of vegans in my family, but I dig on everything. They also make conversations and writing more interesting, showing personality and creativity. $5 words can help me stand out, whether I'm giving a presentation like this, writing an essay, or just hanging with friends. They can pack more meaning into fewer words, and sometimes they even make people smile because of how funny or unexpected they sound. Give me liberty or give me death. Some of my favorite $5 words are ambiguous. It's ambiguous that the word journey is not immunity. I also have to add the word literacy. Phenomenal. My summer has been phenomenal. That is so much more specific than me saying my summer has been great. Notorious. Southwest Airlines is notorious for having the longest terminal in Salt Lake City, Utah. What ideas do you all have? Scan this QR code so we can build a word cloud together. I named this word cloud Cha-Ching. How cool is that? It's onomatopoeia, and that, my friends, is a cool $5 word.
I'm going to pull it up in just a second, okay?
And if you had, if you need the link, I put it into the chat window as well, in the webinar chat. So you can click the link in the webinar chat.
Oh, wow. Remember, Jenny already said homunculus. Jenny, I hope you put it in here. Aldrey, I don't know. Some of these might be like $10 words. Hyperbole, sublime, bombastic, onomatopoeia. Let's see, chaotic, tremendous, disingenuous, scrumptious, subterfuge, tremendous, resilient, stupendous, fabulous, superb, multimodality. So many, LJ. Spectacular, intuitive, snoodle, outrageous, cacophony, intricate, rambunctious. What do you think, LJ? What do you think about these? A good group. Yeah, this is great. intricate, did I already say that? Lethargic, despair, aspirate, cranky, that's a good one. Let's see, think what else, loquacious, photosynthesis,
Uncle Ryan. Use the cloud. Uncle Ryan used the cloud.
we can't tell who did it, so maybe he already did. Umami, let's see, quacktastic, famous, outrageous, interdimensional, voracious, quintessential, umbrage. This is impressive. These are really good. All right, I'm going to go back, LJ. I think there's still a few more coming in, but I will go back here. Okay, thanks for participating, everybody, with your examples of $5 words.
Who is deciding which words are pre-programmed into a device before the language system is released to the public? And what does the process look like? Are AAC users involved in the process at each step of development? I do not know the answers, but here is how I decide if I want to add a word, and if so, where I want to add it. First, I decide if it is a word I'm currently using a lot or will use high frequency. Also, is it a simple word that I could use my QWERTY keyboard to spell? If not, then I try to figure out how many hits it might take me to talk around the subject versus what and where I should program it. For example, I use the word predict for a lot of English and science content. We thought it made the most sense to add this to the think button. Sometimes I think about how the word connects to other words I already have in my system. Does it belong in a certain category, like emotions, actions, or school subjects? Could it help me make connections during conversations? Could it help me explain what I mean more clearly? Other times, I consider the social side of things. Let us be honest. Teenagers say a lot of stuff that's not in most AAC devices. Words like bro or cringe are pretty common in my high school, but they're usually not pre-programmed. Neither are phrases like what the heck or that's sus. These might not be academic words, but they're real words that help me fit in and express myself. That matters too. One of my favorite idioms is I am on the fence. It is not always easy to express that I am undecided or unsure without saying something like that. So I have added it to be able to say it quickly enough that I am not left behind in the conversation. I also think about words from class that could have multiple uses. A word like mitosis is probably only useful on a biology page for me. I doubt I will ever need to say that outside of school, unless I am joking. But words like mood, tone, or revise are useful in class, in writing, and in conversations. So even though they came from school, I would consider adding them to more general pages in my device so I can find them faster.
There's been a couple topics that you and I, LJ, have talked about over the years and different issues when it comes to AAC. And you're a huge advocate for AAC and for language. And so we have a few thoughts here, don't we, on challenges in the current AAC landscape, right? For SLPs and even in education. And so as an SLP myself, when I think of AAC and potential barriers to that, or potential barriers to using language via AAC, I think about the technology and then I think about the implementation or the intervention. And so in this case, some potential barriers could be for someone using AAC that the technology itself the hardware or the software, that the technology itself that's provided to someone who needs AAC doesn't allow for robust language. And what I mean by robust language is large amounts of vocabulary from a variety of parts of speech, word parts, and access to a QWERTY keyboard. And sometimes that technology, either because of limitations to the hardware or the software, or because of the people that are surrounding that person, doesn't provide access to those words, right? So it might be too limited in terms of variety of words, number of words, complexity, et cetera. So that's the technology side. Perhaps the technology itself isn't lending itself to having this rich vocabulary and word parts. But then we think about the intervention or the instruction. And sometimes the instruction that we see isn't teaching this vocabulary, right? The instruction is either too limited in terms of vocabulary, for example, teaching all nouns, or limited in terms of teaching language for a variety of communicative functions. So not just focusing on requesting things, but using language for lots of different reasons. Or sometimes the instruction that someone's given who's using AAC doesn't address grammar, doesn't address morphology or increasing that linguistic complexity, or maybe doesn't view using an AAC device as also a receptive language tool as well. So thinking about that from instruction. So last thing we wanted to say about that was oftentimes people surrounding the person using AAC have assumptions about that person's ability to learn or need language. And that therefore impacts the first two things I just talked about, impacts their decisions about what to provide, and then impacts their instruction about that. So those are things that you and I have talked about a lot, right, LJ, over the years, because that results in a lack of access or understanding of advanced vocabulary, of $5 words, and overall language skills, right, for the user. And that can impact academic success, post-school options, and then quality of life, like you mentioned, in terms of frustration and not being able to say exactly what you want to say.
The current landscape, from my point of view, is that things become important as we grow because our interests grow deeper and we become more curious. Today, our practice is not very well known. We need to build a procedure for AAC engineering. I have become really interested in computer science principles, coding, and math. Many pre-algebra and algebra vocabulary are not in our language systems, but they could be. It would be great to have vocab expansion packs that families or school districts could buy to give us more access to words we need. Until then, my school accommodations on my IEP provide me vocab lists for each upcoming class that I am going to be taking at the start of summer. This helps me because my mom and I can talk about whether I think I want to add a word to my device. Time is always tough for me, so having the summer enables me the time to familiarize myself with where these words are located. If AAC users were involved in the software and hardware design, we could brainstorm what should be added. Core words are spoken and written, what you read, and also what you hear, plus they are high-frequency words in any language, and they tend to be verbs, prepositions, adjectives, pronouns, and adverbs. Fringe words are nouns. You cannot put together a sentence or a phrase if you only have nouns. For me, personal core words are words a person uses all the time, but they might be low-frequency words to somebody else. I have a service dog named Locke. Locke is for sure a personal core word for me. So we need more than core words, because we need nouns and verbs and lots of other things to build a sentence. Core changes over time and with age. When I was younger, I was learning placement and working memory to learn where buttons were. As I have gotten older, and I think I'll use a word high frequency, I will probably add it. For example, the word accept. Accept because I was talking about my question of whether I will be accepted to talk at the ASHA conference. P.S. I am and I am so excited. For that word, I chose to add it to the think button, and then the green light go button. I have the verb tenses all programmed out. Less frequently used $5 words are very important. I want to tell you a story that I think highlights their importance. When I was younger, I did not have the words to tell my dad what I wanted for dinner. Meat rectangle is what came out. I loved meatloaf, but at the time there was not a way for me to spell out loaf, which was no T in my language system. So I used to call it meat rectangle. Rectangle because of the pan shape my dad cooked it in. And rectangle was in my shapes page. Later during the pandemic, my dad baked a ton of loaves of bread, so it made sense to add loaf to my language system. Spelling is a constant that I am always working on, and it is crucial to my literacy journey as well. I have recently turned word prediction off my device so that I can focus more on the correct spelling of words. After Camp Alec this summer, when I returned home, I teased my mom about how she had probably forgotten how to make a pretty omelet for my breakfast. Well, it was beautiful, and I typed how I had underestimated her. I didn't have that word in my device, but I had under. So I combined under and spelled summated, which was close enough she knew what I meant. If I were to spell out loaf nowadays, I would. And I know how to spell estimate now too. Having $5 words are important because they encourage continued learning and curiosity about new experiences. Another example, you could say my hand has fallen asleep. Or with a $5 word, you could say something more involved like this. My hand is numb. AAC takes lots of planning, organizing, and collaborating for me with my family and specialists. The time required for us to format our answers, in addition to the time required physically to make a selection, is compounded by also being under pressure in some situations, such as fast-paced general education classrooms. This can result in AAC user selections being lower. For me, this can make me fatigued, have a slower communication rate, and not giving much detail in some of my communications. Not every AAC end user has the ability to program in new words or have someone around them to do so, which means they are stuck with whatever words or concepts the device manufacturer decided to give them or what a team thinks they need. Here is a list of just a few words that I had to add. Correct, course, detail, journey, suggest, swear, upload, and believable. Obviously, I wanted the word course because I am a foodie, and when I want a first course, an entree, and a dessert course, I have to have these words to convince my parents to let me order in that way. Swear is a funny story. I used what Ms. Amy, and I call word approximation. I did not yet have the word swear in my device, so I used the shapes page again. I asked my mom one day, we were trying to decide on a place to grab lunch. I asked, what is the place with pastries that everyone swears by? Same word, but for a different purpose. I am your typical teen, and I asked my mom if I could have some swear words added to my AAC. So whether it's asking for a 3-course meal or describing my journey in detail, each new word gives me more freedom to express myself. My AAC is not just about communication. It is about personality, humor, and being able to speak up just like everyone else. My current goals are actually really just ongoing goals. They're targeting word identification, spelling, building my writing skills, and my reading skills. Using AAC to communicate, but not being able to rely on producing speech made my understanding of the English rules that much harder. Can you just imagine for a moment trying to learn German, but you have no way of speaking it out loud? So Ms. Amy and I continue to work on using prefixes and suffixes so that I can build words. I am learning and relearning things like phonetics, consonants, long vowels, and sound blending. I am also working on my silent reading to improve my literacy. Some of my other goals are to finish high school and go to college. I want to get a job in web design or coding, possibly at one of the local libraries, but I also might job hunt for a restaurant job like at Jake's Ice Cream or Ruthie's all day. And of course, I plan to continue to advocate for other AAC communicators. You have to give language and vocabulary in order to get language and vocabulary from your AAC users. Likewise, nobody ever died from having too much vocabulary. Give us the words so we can have robust, rich communication.
Well, LJ and Amy, before I get to the questions, I just want you to go into your imagination and imagine that there are hundreds of people clapping and cheering and shouting your name, because I know without a doubt that's what would be happening if we were in
Miss
person.
Amy, what our talk name? Miss Amy, what's our top name?
Oh, for Asha? Oh, I'd have to remember the title. Let me look it up, okay? I don't want to get it wrong, so I have to look up the exact title. I'll look that up while we're
Okay.
looking at questions.
LJ, are you too exhausted, or can you take a few questions? Okay. I'm gonna try this. If I press this button, do you guys see the question?
I do
No.
not. No.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll just read it to you. How do you suggest, LJ, figuring out what an AAC user's $5 words are?
That's a good question.
I think we just tell them different words and ask, do they enjoy that? I think we just tell them different words and ask, do they enjoy that?
Is that how you and Amy work together?
Yeah, there was definitely times that you specifically told me you wanted to add a word, and I was actually just going to say, there were times where you hear words, right? And you would either tap your device to let me know that's something you wanted to be added, or you just showed interest in it. So I think paying attention to, someone's response when they hear certain words, obviously if they tell you as well, but just paying attention to that interest you know, depending on the age and, you know, the abilities, being able to kind of be a detective and figure out what words seem really interesting to them would be really good as well.
All right, LJ, I'm going to need your permission on this. I believe it's your Uncle Hank has raised his hand requesting to speak. Shall I unmute him and allow him to speak? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, Mr. Hank.
Great.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. LJ, I am not this kind of an engineer, but I am an engineer. This is not as simple an issue as LJ and some of you make it seem. There's something like 500,000 words in the OEC, the Oxford English Dictionary. The amount of pages that LJ and the difficulty in finding them, I think, would be unbelievable. Why are we not talking directly to the AAC manufacturers and trying to find out some reasonable way of doing this rather than just complaining among ourselves?
Thank you, Hank. That's a very good question. And I'm excited that we've been able to come together and hear LJ's perspective and get a peek into the journey that he and Amy have taken, because it really speaks to the work of a team and creating the infrastructure for language growth is no easy task. Like you said, there's so many words to think about considering. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I was excited to have this webinar happen today. So we all agree.
And to have LJ and family members of all AAC users asking the same question and pushing for the same thing.
So there is a question, and I'll just kind of it's a two-part question and more of an observation. One is from Anonymous, and they said it would be helpful to see how LJ writes an answer on his device. And I'm just going to say that from what I know about you and how you're positioned, your body is positioned next to your device, I think it would be challenging to have the camera change so that we can see your face and your device. So what I'm going to do is put in the chat window an invitation for everyone.
Biology. He goes to a page that says biology.
If you would like to, had to mute LJ. If you would like to experience the AAC system that LJ is using, I just put a link in the chat, and you can go to the PRC Saltillo website and download an emulator. LJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but you use the language system called Unity 84 sequenced. Is that correct? Okay. So when you go and download the emulator, you will want to load that language system and you can explore it yourself. And that would be a really fun activity for everybody to do that's not familiar, just so you can see the challenges that it takes for someone to learn not just how to communicate with another person, but to learn all the words. That's no small feat. Okay. So there's a comment you might want to reply to or affirm, LJ. This is from BJ, who said that getting designers, developers, and project teams to include AAC users at the start of the project is a challenge for people with all disabilities. Nothing about us without us.
Agreed. Agreed, amen. Agreed, amen.
And actually, LJ, you asked me about our title for ASHA, and I wanted to make sure I had it exactly right. So I looked it up, and I think it's relevant to this discussion because you and I are going to co-present at ASHA, right? And so we were talking about having more AAC users presenting on AAC to SLPs, for example, and to others as well. So the title of the session is The Future Starts Now, AAC User Perspectives on Facilitating AAC Communicative Competence.
And if you can't remember that, when you get to ASH and you get to the online schedule, just type in
Yeah.
LJ. You'll find it. Here's an interesting question. LJ, when you, and you may not remember this, but when you were first learning word locations on your device, did you have all the words available to see, or did you have most words and buttons hidden until you learned them?
Miss Amy. Hence. I don't know. No. Miss Amy. I don't know, Miss Amy.
So we did not use any masking. All the words that we're showing. So when we very first met, you were on Unity 60 and we changed it to Unity 84 full, and we never used any masking. So all the words were there all the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to expand on that a little bit. LJ, when I first learned about you, it was from a webinar that you presented for Perkins, where you're speaking about your accommodations and modifications for curriculum for your vision impairment. I worked with a lot of people who have vision impairments, and I find an interesting challenge to try and support them as they learn their communication AAC devices. Do you guys mind talking a little bit about those early years? Because I understand based on your webinar that I previously watched that was something that evolved with your language as well. Do you mind talking about your vision a little bit and AAC access?
It was. Motor. Planning. And. Two. Color. Button. Buttons. It was mostly motor planning into color buttons. It was mostly motor planning into color buttons.
And so just to add to that, in case someone is not as familiar with what you mean by that, LJ, in terms of motor planning, you have a system that uses consistent locations, predictable motor patterns, et cetera. So you were able to, even if you weren't able to necessarily see it, develop those motor plans for those words over time. But yes, I distinctly remember doing some color coding, working with Mom really closely and doing some color coding of, vocabulary on certain pages, for example. And then due to motor things too, right, LJ, because because of the way that you access the system, we also made some adjustments for parts that were hard to access as well, right? Just motorically, moving things up off the bottom and up to the top and things like that. So I would kind of put it all together, absolutely motor planning, but certainly making adjustments for color coding and access as well.
Thank you, guys. We have just a few more minutes until the top of the hour. Y'all still good to take a few more questions? Okay. Amanda asked, given complex programming, Who do you allow to program your device?
Only my mom. Now, question. How was mom feeling during Mr. Hannah? The school one on one programming. Are you mom? Okay. To tell. Feelings. Only my mom now. Question. How is mom feeling during Mr. Hen in the school one-on-one programming? Are you mom okay to tell feelings?
This is LJ's mom. He's referring to when he's at school, since I'm not with him at school, vocabulary and phrases would come up. And so, yes, he and I are sort of the gatekeepers of who gets to program vocabulary. But we did devise a sort of system where we kept a Google document, a Google sheet rather, and that allowed us to kind of go after hours after school through some of the phrases and vocabulary that came up, and that way we could decide if we wanted to add it. So that was a kind of nice collaboration between the educators and speech therapists at school with us.
Thank you. How about just two more questions? One specifically for Amy, and then one more for LJ. So Jessica asks, I have a question for Amy. I have patients with AAC as their main communication, and we rely on the patient's insurance to approve ongoing therapy. Once they have reached, quote, functional communication, end quote, where they can request and share personal basic information with their AAC, insurance will opt for discharge, and all remainder communication must be learned with parent and just life. In our setting, $5 words would be something I may not even get a chance to work on. Our insurance is in your state approving ongoing therapy for cases like this.
Yeah, and I think I was going to say it's a constant battle, so I'm sure it's true.
Yeah.
It's a constant battle, right, LJ? So, I mean, and I know, like, obviously I've worked really closely with you guys and with mom, and, you know, to write letters of medical necessity and to liaise with insurance to continue to advocate for continued services. It's a constant battle. And, you know, and Jen, you could maybe speak a little bit to that too, but that has definitely been the case over the last couple of years, constantly having to, you know, write things up and get on the phone with insurance to try to continue to use their same language, but push for why this is, I think, beyond, you know, they don't care about quality of life, but certainly I keep trying to play into, you know, the necessity piece. So I don't have a good answer for that, except that it's a constant battle across states and across plans. Yeah.
Okay, I lied. LJ, I actually have two questions for you. Are there AAC goals you've had that you did not like? And second part is, and what have been some of your favorite goals?
I don't think I have anything not like I love working through this list called the 7 50 50 5 0. I don't think I have anything not like I love working through this list called a nifty thrifty 50.
I also think that it's important that LJ, you have been involved in choosing the goals. So I think that's part of it, right? You know, talk about what you want to work on, what you think you want to work on. So I think part of your liking the goals, right, is because you're intrinsically motivated by them. Those are ones that you've identified as things you want to work on. So kind of, you know, kind of bringing in those UDL elements here. LJ is involved with the goal development.
And I happen to know Amy personally, and she's good for a good time. So I just have to imagine you two have a lot of fun. Over the years, you've had a lot of fun working together.
Try.
Okay, let's make this the last question. And if I didn't get to yours, are there, oh, hold on. Okay, so BJ just, I think, added another comment question. BJ asked a question earlier and asked, are there AAC user groups that the manufacturers can hear from users? So do you have any AAC advocacy groups that you particularly recommend that manufacturers should tap into? Okay.
I mean, I was going to say in the US, there's USAC, so I don't know if there's an opportunity there to partner up. But I would say, and then I know we have people here from other countries, but there's also the International Society for AAC as well.
Okay, now this really is the last question because we only have 3 minutes left. LJ, what colleges have you thought about applying to? And any particular majors that you are exploring?
Special 2 1 education. And George 2 Mason 4 Special education of George Mason or GW.
Well, they would be lucky to have you as a student. I know in the future you'll have some great opportunities. Well, I want to say thank you, LJ and Amy, for all the time that you put into this and for answering all these questions. And I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us live. And if you're watching the recording, appreciate your attention.
So LJ and I just wanted to leave you with what we call the last word, which is a quote from the book that I mentioned earlier, The Word Collector. And I think this is true for everybody, but when I sort of think about this in terms of access to language via AAC, I think it's really poignant. The more words that he knew, the more clearly he could share with the world what he was thinking, feeling, and dreaming. So I think that sort of sums up what LJ has been trying to say here. And
Awesome.
for this.
Thank you. Miss Amy. I am. Great. Awesome. Thank you, Miss. I am grateful.
Well, it's been a fun ride, everybody. And LJ, I just want to acknowledge there's lots and lots of comments happening in the chat that you might not have a moment to look at before we end right now, but I will send you a copy of those so you can read them at your leisure.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.